Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to our Nichecast podcast on December the 7th. Big up yourself. Hope you're doing all right around the glorious lands of Aotearoa and this beautiful planet. We are from the niche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sporting matters. And if you can't read, don't worry. You can fill your ears with our podcast. We're here doing two podcasts every week. And of course, we do our subscriber podcast for members of the Patreon, whānau, and those with a paid Substack subscription. Yesterday, we recorded our subscriber podcast and we reacted to the Football Ferns loss against Colombia. We also dropped some last-minute Blackcaps test thoughts for their series against Bangladesh. We basically pondered Henry Nicholls' place in the Blackcaps Test first 11, and it didn't matter at all because he's straight back in there for a glorious knock of, what did he get, 1 run off 10 deliveries? So
1 run, yeah.
I was
just a cheeky one.
I was a bit iffy that this is going to be the moment where Henry Nicholls gets a big score, because that's what he does, but he kind of crumbled, like the Blackcaps top order there. But we will touch on the Blackcaps in a jiffy because we have an ODI squad to digest. Obviously, the first day of their test against Bangladesh. Also got 2 Wellington Phoenix games to chat our way through. And we also have White Ferns. We've got Ford Trophy as well today. So we'll talk about some Ford Trophy cricket later on in the podcast. Once those games are away, we'll just set the tone with the teams selected, any notable bits and bobs from Ford Trophy cricket. So as far as the flow of the podcast and the menu, will be a bit all over the show. And with that all over the show vibration starts with the Football Ferns. And I am curious, because I feel like it's like really clear cut in my mind. And after we talked about the Football Ferns in that subscriber podcast yesterday, which is out through Patreon and Substack for the folks who donate directly to the Niche Case and basically fund the Niche Case at this point, because I mean, we're doing our best, but it's slow progress over here, you know? So if anyone wants to fund the Niche Case further, join the Patreon whānau, join the Substack whānau. You can make a donation through Buy Me a Coffee, or if you want to just maybe you want to invest, like, I don't know, just we're out here doing our best, but it's slow progress and we keep our heads up, we keep grinding, we keep serving our mission to celebrate Aotearoa sporting excellence. But the Football Ferns, where do you sit with the number of players used for Football Ferns? It's got to be over 30. Like, just players used for the Football Ferns this year, it's at least 30, right?
Yeah, definitely. It would be more. They had over 40 in their pre-World Cup sort of the widest training squad, but there were a few players that weren't ever going to, weren't really in contention. They're just sort of filling things out. But they've also brought in more players since then. So in terms of professional female footballers, so we scratch out the domestic ones that might have been on the fringes there, scratch out the university students in America, even maybe scratch out some of those academy Phoenix players or whatever. I don't really know that any of them are on the Football Ferns fringes, but probably around 30, I'd say. Yeah.
Well, it's at least 30,
if you're playing professionally, you're in the mix for the Football Ferns. I'd say there's about 30.
Forget about the professional players. Like, the Football Ferns have selected at least 30 players.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is they've selected more than the professional quantities, but the professional ones are probably the ones where you're thinking, that's your World Cup squad is going to become from these lot, you know?
Because we've talked about that with the Blackcaps. The Blackcaps, their ODI squad, bunch of new players. There's almost as many players unavailable. There's a team worth of unavailable players for their ODI squad against Bangladesh. Yeah. Along with the squad that's been named. And we've talked about that before. There's 30 decent cricketers who the Blackcaps can select from. There's 30 decent footballers who the Football Ferns can select from. There's at least 30 all-whites players that you can select from. Kiwis, Kiwi Ferns, Rugby League, easy. The Kiwis defeated Australia 30-0, speaking of 30, number of the day. And they had a bunch of players unavailable. young players, experienced players. Like the Kiwi-NRL stocks are firing, the NRL Wahine stocks are firing. Both those teams have plenty of depth. And swinging back to the football Ferns, the football Ferns are building out a deep squad of players, as all these other teams are. They're playing games against good opposition. Like the Always, both these teams are playing against a lot of games against teams who are better. So as we end this year and having absorbed a lot of your football Ferns information, and especially talking yesterday in our subscriber podcast, the football Ferns, they've had a good work. They had a World Cup where they made some good progress. They made some moves. It could have been better for sure, but I don't know. It just seems like the football Ferns are just building things out. They're just building out the system, building out the pipeline, building out the style of footy. They've got an identity, gritty, grimy defense, and they're gaining attacking players. I think the football Ferns are aligned with all these other Kiwi sports teams where it's a lot of development leaps and progress is being made. And it's not just the national teams. We're seeing with the franchises, the Phoenix, the Warriors, not the Breakers. And you're seeing it in every kind of pocket of Aotearoa sport. And the only team I'm not really seeing this is with the White Ferns, and we'll talk about them soon. But because there is that kind of, I think football folk are just negative Nancy's anyway. So people complain about the All Whites, people complain about the football Ferns, and they also complain about the Blackcaps. Like, there's a lot of complainers around. But all these teams have a lot of depth. They've got good variety of depth. They've got the most talent that these teams have ever really had. And the football Ferns, it might not seem it like this year, but I think this is a strong foundation year for them to build upon, with now knowing like who they are, how they want to play their football, and looking forward to the depth that will be flooding into that team that has already flooded that team.
Yeah, I did a quick scan just now of my Flying Kiwis long list, and I counted 28 professional female footballers on that, not including the A-League. So there's a bunch at the Wellington Phoenix. There's eight or so, 8 to 10 at Aussie A-League clubs. So that probably takes them up beyond, I don't know, probably around about 50, which is, I think, how many you'd have Kiwi blokes outside of the A-League professional. But obviously, professional is a bit of a catch-all term. So there's some in that 28 for the Ferns who are just like at levels below the A-League. There's some, like, at least one is retired, so is ineligible, and a few of them just haven't been picked for a little while. But as a baseline of what you're dealing with there, that's more depth than the football Ferns have ever had before. Like, that's unquestioned. That's undeniable. It's only in the last couple of years that the All Whites have even been able to pick a squad entirely of professional players with no amateurs. That's, if it's only happened in the last few years, obviously that's unprecedented as well. Like, that's a new era for the All Whites. And yeah, it is a slow process, though. I think that is the thing to keep in mind, is when we see the promise, we get excited. We think, like, look at the talent coming through, and then the talent comes through and they don't win immediately, and then people get upset. It's important to pump the brakes. And I felt this way watching the football Ferns splutter to not score goals once again, thinking, well, they finished that second game against Colombia with Ava Collins up front, Ruby Nathan up front, and Paige Satchel up front. Like, that was their front three. One of them's never played professionally. One of them's about 6 games into her professional career, was on debut and is still a teenager, and played at the Under-17 World Cup last year, literally just last year. And the other one has 2 goals and 48 caps. So I don't know what, like, on the one hand, damn, they didn't score another goal. On the other hand, why would I have expected them to score a goal? I think that's an important thing to keep in mind with that thing about all that depth, is that you gotta let things take root. You gotta let the tree blossom and come. And it especially when you're dealing with a lot of young players, it doesn't happen on day one. but that doesn't mean there isn't progress being made, you know.
Yeah, and Colombia's a better team. Like
And
the
Colombia's
thing,
a better team.
everyone who is a football fan and not a football fan, they seem to completely ignore the fact that the All Whites and the football Ferns are consistently playing against better teams. So if you're expecting teenagers to dominate better teams, you're insane. And I like you say it's a slow process. I agree, but things will move faster after this year. So wrapping up
Yeah,
2023 with that series against Colombia, which we reacted to in our subscriber podcast, I think this is a really solid year of football Ferns mahi that will lead to progress in the coming years. On our website, theniche-case.com, we've got our Flying Kiwis weekly yarn, so you can tap in with the best overseas professional footballers from Aotearoa. I did write about the White Ferns after their T20 series loss to Pakistan. That's live on the website. We also have 6 sneaky New Zealand Warriors juniors to learn about. That is live on our website right now. Off the top of my head, we got Zion Mai'uu, we've got Eddie Iramia, we got Patrick Moimoi, Harry Durbin, Etuati Fukafuka, and Presley Siumanu Tingafua. 6 sneaky New Zealand Warriors juniors to learn about. All 6 eligible for under-19 SG Ball this year. All 6 played against men this year, either in Fox Memorial or New South Wales Cup. And we also dish out our Monday and Friday newsletter via Substack. I reckon I'm going to be highlighting 5 halves to learn about. Not in the Warriors, but in the Kiwi-NRL ranks. And I've got that list right here. We've got Oliver Lowry from Christchurch. He is training with the Tigers NRL squad. And big up to Christchurch. We talk a lot about this quality of Aotearoa Rugby League. We got 2 halves from Christchurch in Australian systems. Because you've also got Bronson Rubin from, I think he's a Northern Bulldogs junior, which is like Northern Christchurch, Northern Canterbury. He's deep in the Bulldogs system. I think he was Harold Matthews, which is under 17 this year. So, and he was like a starting halfback. The Bulldogs also have Mariki Aumua. I believe he's from the Manawatu. He's in their system as a half. You've got Cassius Tia, Roosters half. SG Ball, Jersey Flegg, New South Wales Cup. He's a really good halves prospect with the Roosters. He's a Marist Saints junior in Auckland. And we've got Ryder Williams. Big man Ryder Williams. He's also a Marist Saints junior in Auckland. Said it a few times already. He is the youngest player with a development contract for the Titans, and he's a half. So big up to them. And this is the strength of Aotearoa Rugby League. We got 5 young halves in Australian systems, not mentioning any Warriors players right there. So I'll be writing about that in our newsletter tomorrow, coming out on Friday via Substack, thenewscase.substack.com. You got anything you're pondering for the newsletter tomorrow?
well, I'm not sure if it'll be tomorrow, but while we're talking about just the growing depth in a lot of these sports, I did want to, and I'm also working hard at getting my teams of the season done for the National League. That's a little bit of an effort though, so I don't know if they'll have time to finish that this week. We'll see how that goes. Ideally, I'll get one of them out, but I don't know. But I did want to do in more in keeping with the sort of teams of the week I was doing throughout the season. I did want to do like I don't know if it would be under 20s or if I just wouldn't put a label of just say best young players or whatever, something along those lines. For the men's and women's national league, just to highlight the prospects, especially in an age where we're seeing that the best young players at that level not that far away from the professional rounds. Every year now there is multiple. We've had a bunch of players actually from the men's national league go and sign with Aussie NPL clubs, which sort of feels like a natural progression. One step to the next, but you're seeing players like the younger players who have the potential to grow and getting on that professional scene nice and early. That's happening a lot, like, and not just to A-League clubs as well, but to overseas clubs, and men and women. Like I'm thinking of Olivia Page going from Eastern Suburbs to Sheffield United this year. Bunch of them doing so every year now in the men's comp. So I wouldn't. My CFA we'll see how I go with that one. I might be able to scribble something up for tomorrow. Maybe one on Friday, one on Monday. We'll see.
Any Phoenix yarns coming? We need some Phoenix content. You got any Phoenix
There,
ideas
there will
coming?
be, there will be at some point, but it was a football Ferns weekend, so I have got a football thing. Oh well, if there's not a Phoenix written yarn this week, there'll definitely be something in the email tomorrow. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I
And
know.
there
And
was some Phoenix stuff on Monday as well.
I knew I had to poke the bear because I knew the answers. There's no Phoenix content because you've been deep in National League, you've been deep in All Whites, you've been deep in Football Ferns, so there's all that content through the niche case, and you're talking about the Phoenix in our newsletters every Monday and Friday, regardless of what is happening on our website, theniche-case.com. So you can either head over to theniche-case.com for the in-depth analysis, and if you can't find what you're looking for on our website, theniche-case.com, you can probably find it in our newsletter coming out via Substack on Monday and Friday evenings for all your Aotearoa sporting needs. As I said before, you can support the Niche Case by subscribing on YouTube. You can join the Patreon whānau. You can upgrade your free Monday and Friday newsletter subscription via Substack. You can upgrade that to a paid Substack subscription, which helps the Niche Case out immensely as well. You can also tell a friend. You can also check us out on Twitter, Instagram. We got the clips, we got the information. We're just covering all the angles for your Aotearoa sporting needs, and we need some mindfulness. What do you got, Chief?
Well, how about this then from, I believe, former Roman Emperor Marcus Tullius Cicero, who said, "There is nothing so absurd that some philosopher has not already said it."
Especially these days, because we've got a lot of history. We've got a lot of history behind us that many philosophers and sages and monks and just general wise folks have shared with us. And it does feel like the modern philosopher loves to big up themselves and their ideas, but I'd suggest that you look deeper into history and you apply what has been said, what has been taught in history. Obviously, there's some things you don't want. Like, I don't want any colonizer ideas in my veins because I've worked through all my colonizer guilt and I don't want any more of that shit in me. So I'm not taking any of that information. I'm not taking some other areas of historical societies. I'm not taking any of that information, but if you go looking, you'll find a lot of wisdom and insights that can be applied today. And you don't need the modern jokers. Like, they're just regurgitating other people's ideas anyway. The Blackcaps did a fantastic job of bowling Bangladesh out for 172 on the first day. However, anytime I saw a delivery rip past the Bangladeshi batsman from, I think, the best spinner in New Zealand is Mitchell Santner. I think he's the most skillful. I talked about that yesterday in our subscriber podcast. I think he's the most accurate, the most skillful, and the most talented spinner from New Zealand right now. Those deliveries, and Santner and Patel were bowling pretty early, and you're like, wow, this is epic. These guys are really good at spin bowling. Rah, rah, rah. Yeah, but then the hosts have a crack as well. That's the good thing about cricket, is everyone gets to have a crack. You can you don't judge a pitch until both teams have batted. And if the Kiwi spinners were dominating, obviously the host spinners are going to dominate as well. So the Blackcaps are now 55 for 5, and we'll see. I don't know. I'm not really expecting much resistance from the Blackcaps at this stage. Like, this is a very niggly, tricky spot for them to be in. Because I think this is a lot more lively than what we saw in Pakistan last summer. And it's a bit more Indian, where you've got some really good spinners on tracks that offer zip, bit of spin, variable bounce, and it's going to be pretty tricky. I don't think the Blackcaps are bad. I don't think the Blackcaps are playing bad cricket. I think it's just a massive challenge on these sort of decks in Bangladesh, which is essentially the equivalent of Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, coming to Aotearoa, Hagley Oval, cloudy, overcast, green. You know, there's a lot of chat about doctored pitches and you know, do you want to how challenging do you want to make your local pitches as hosts? Well, the Blackcaps in New Zealand, we do it great because it's all seam friendly, honkadory. We dominate teams with our pitches, and then you go to other countries and they get to return the favor. So the Blackcaps spinners were good. Bangladesh, they returned the favor. Blackcaps pitches are seam friendly, really hard for especially Asian tourists to bat on. Go to Bangladesh, they return the favor. So it's just a challenging spot for the Blackcaps against Bangladesh. Anything you thought of, learned from the first day's action in the second test? Also, Mushfiqur Rahim handling the ball, that was a bit of a thing as well.
Yeah, two really weird things that happened on day one was the out. I think technically obstructing the field was what they said, which is baffling, but also in a weird way completely obvious and correct. Like it's just a weird thing that happened, but also what's he doing? Like just an insane bit of cricket. But the other one was Tim Southey bowling, I think 5.2 overs, 5 maidens, 1 wicket for no runs. It was some of the truly unique bowling figures right there. Particularly because we're talking about what a spin friendly deck it was, and then there was I thought both the seamers actually bowled really well. They just didn't get a chance because the spinners were turning the ball so much. You're not wrong about all the like the home conditions thing, but I am reminded about the last time Bangladesh came to New Zealand and we let them play the first game on a dusty Mount Maunganui wicket where they were able to actually beat New Zealand for the first time in any format of cricket. And now apparently that's just taken hold now. They're getting the hang of this thing. And in the second, I did see as well, the second test of that series where the Blackcaps did come back and win the second. I can't remember where they were playing, but that game finished off with Ross Taylor taking a wicket with his last act in Test cricket for bowling figures. I think he only bowled 1 over for bowling figures of 1 wicket for 0 runs, which is apparently the most recent time that someone has got 1 for none. Now Tim Southey's done it again since. So it happens against Bangladesh every couple Test matches apparently. Yeah, I don't know. When Mitchell Santner's turning the ball that much, and I tend to agree he probably is the most skillful of the spinners and definitely the most accurate, the most sort of creative as well in his way. I think the creativity has sometimes been developed because of the fact he doesn't spin the ball as much and he doesn't have as sort of dramatic. He has a lot of variations, but his variations aren't as dramatic, except for that one year where he was trying to bowl carom balls, but that didn't seem to stick. But I also think that skill set is overwhelmingly a white ball thing rather than a red ball thing. I mean, he was 1 wicket away from getting his best ever Test figures here, and he only took 3 wickets, so that shows that it's not stuck. And I was disappointed to see the team lineup. Not that he was not disappointed to see Santner in the lineup, but disappointed to see Santner and Patel. And I saw that thinking like, I don't know if I want to watch these dudes just bowl 20 overs straight together with left arm orthodox stuff. As it happened, it was a lot more exciting than I thought it was going to be because wickets were just falling. But if those dudes are turning the ball that much, then the Bangladeshi spinners who outperformed the Kiwi set in the first test were always going to be turning it even more so and in more directions with more variation and more danger in general. And fair play, because like there's a couple of dudes who I think play spin extremely well in the Blackcaps. One of them is Kane Williamson, obviously, and he got out to one of the best in close catches I've ever seen. Unreal short leg, whatever, silly mid wicket. I don't know. Unreal catch. And then the other two that I think would be high on that list are definitely Daryl Mitchell, and I think arguably Glenn Phillips has some of the similar tactics in a very different way. I think with them it's because they're aggressive against spin and will like use their feet, get to the get to the pitch of the ball and not let it turn a bit more. That's going to get them out at some point, but I do think that gives us a chance of maybe like first session today, score some quick runs and beat into that total and make it a closer game than it could be. Because I don't think I don't think we're going to get anywhere by blocking through this the rest of this innings and trying to bat time. Like, first of all, time is now irrelevant because this test has been sped up so much. We're already halfway through the second innings. And then also you're just going to get out defending, so you might as well get out attacking, I suppose. But others have tried. I mean, Henry Nicholls tried to play an aggressive shot. It didn't work for him, so we'll see. But it's a frustrating thing when you see that where our spinners are bowling really well. Cool, this is awesome. Oh wait, we also have to bat on this wicket. This isn't so awesome anymore. Like it's this sort of I don't know, little caged experience. You can't sort of separate one from the other. It's the unfortunate thing, but we'll see what the test has in store over the remaining. I was going to say 4 days, but we're probably looking more at 2 at this range.
So the Blackcaps also announced an ODI squad to take on Bangladesh, which is apparently next weekend in New Zealand. So it's a interesting calendar as usual, but it's again, Blackcaps depth on display. And when you look at the players unavailable, Bracewell's injured, Henry's injured, Ferguson's injured, Neesham's injured, Lister's injured, Shipley's injured, Williamson, Southey, Mitchell, Santner, Phillips, and Conway are all being rested. Ishodi's only playing the first game, then he's being rested. Ashok comes in. This just like maps out Blackcaps cricket. And like there is the selection of Will O'Rourke. We've talked a lot about him. Good seam bowler, tall, funky. But he's like, Will O'Rourke is still behind Henry Shipley in my mind. That's the way I view it. So you can think, oh my God, like the Blackcaps selecting younger players, but they're also selecting younger players because the older players are unavailable or they're injured. And that's what we were talking about in the subscriber podcast yesterday. We looked at the leading wicket takers for Blackcaps in Test cricket this year. Only one of them is playing in this test against Bangladesh. That's Tim Southey. I think Michael Bracewell would have been like he's not a monster Test cricketer by any stretch of the imagination, but he is an off spinner. And he was being groomed for this type of role, this type of situation. You know, he was Glenn Phillips before Glenn Phillips. He was Ravindra before Ravindra. Like, it's Michael Bracewell who we forget about a lot. And him, Matt Henry, and Tim Southey have the most Test wickets for New Zealand this year. 2 of them aren't playing in this test. So that's when you do map out the Blackcaps' depth and this pool of players, as this squad does, with Josh Clarkson also coming in and Ashok, you've also got Will O'Rourke there. If you're stressed about the lack of young cricketers, you just need to look at the pool of players there, because there are young cricketers in the pool of players. There are young cricketers playing A cricket. There are young cricketers dominating domestic cricket, but they get their opportunities with this natural rest and rotation that the Blackcaps do pretty well. And this is just another white ball series, in the sense that older players, the kind of all format players, they're being rested, some are injured. It presents opportunities. You do not need to manufacture opportunities for young players. An opportunity has arisen for Will O'Rourke right now. That happens naturally. Like, I love Will O'Rourke, but I don't think he's better than Matt Henry. I do not think he's better than Tim Southey. I don't think he's better than Lockie Ferguson. I don't think he's necessarily better than Ben Lister, because Ben Lister's already played for the Blackcaps and he's a lefty, and I don't think Will O'Rourke is better than Henry Shipley. So you don't need to manufacture like chucking Will O'Rourke in. Those things just naturally allow those opportunities. And Clarkson, good powerful hitter in the middle order, who should be... like, he deserves a crack. He'll get his opportunity. What's he going to do with his opportunity? And then you look like it's still a strong squad. You've got a team of players unavailable, and you've still got Latham, Allen, Blundell, Chapman, Duffy, Jamieson, Milne, our Lord and Saviour Henry Nicholls, Rachin Ravindra, Will Young. But it's a pretty good squad there for the Blackcaps, and it'll be a little bit of young flavour. Couple of players who will be desperate for an opportunity, like someone like Will Young probably wants a really good crack. Henry Nichols needs some runs, so he'll be wanting a crack. I think Adam Milne and Kyle Jamieson are going to be interesting players in this series, but we'll talk about it more in depth next week ahead of the series. But your first reactions to this ODI squad were?
Welcome Will O'Rourke, basically, was the first thing. Was looking at the squad, that's what stuck out, and then looking closer and realizing that that's old where are we? Yeah, it was Josh Clarkson on the graphic that they put up as well. Seeing that and then scanning through the thing. There's I think 4 players from the World Cup squad who are here, not including Jamieson, who was a later addition to the World Cup squad. So, and of them, Tom Latham was first 11. And Mark Chapman, you could make a case for. He started some games. He then was injured. I think he probably was in their first choice squad. But yeah, then you see the old the list of unavailable players with where are we? The official list that they put out: Bracewell, Henry, Ferguson, Neesham, Lister, Shipley. Bolt made himself unavailable, not injured, and then the rest of dudes: Williamson, Southey, Mitchell, Santner, Phillips, Conway. Like that's a hell of a team. Like that 11 is a hell of a team that they are not picking from. And yeah, there is still good depth. Theme of the podcast so far today is they look at what they're still able to find, and this is how, like, to reiterate the point, this is how guys like Will O'Rourke get introduced to international cricket. Is you will have these tours where not everyone can play every game all the time, and the Blackcaps, more than most countries, tend to prefer all format players. They don't tend to specialize. They have one coach who coaches everything. It's worked for them for the most part, but also it is unreasonable to be available for all of this stuff, and especially when you got guys who are coming off a test series in Bangladesh directly after a World Cup in India. Like, it's a long, long time to be away. Apparently, Tom Latham doesn't like his family, so he's still playing. He's the one guy who's going to be there through the entire spell. But other than that, like, yeah, it's the type of, and there is a T20 series as well. I don't think they've named that squad, so I think that's after they play 3 ODIs and then 3 T20s. And like, prayers also to those Bangladeshis who are going to be doing the long haul too, who are equally going from a World Cup into a Test series, and then some of them will play. Although I don't think their World Cup squad and this Test squad had a massive, not as much crossover as the Blackcaps did anyway. I don't know what their ODI squad will look like, let alone their T20s, but there'll be dudes that are involved in at least a couple of those series for them as well. It's definitely doing the long haul, but I mean, that's international cricket. And again, this is how guys for Bangladesh will be getting opportunities they wouldn't otherwise get, same as Will O'Rourke and Josh Clarkson and Eddie Ashok as well.
Tom Latham feels like the cricketing Kieran Foran at this stage. Like, he's just always available.
That's a good comparison.
He always puts his hand up, and he's Tommy Latham hasn't scored many runs of late, and I'd also double down. Like, Conway isn't in his best patch of form either, as we talked maybe on Monday. But Tom Latham's always there, and I don't know, like, he's not as injured, he's not as grisly as Kieran Foran, but he's like not far off. Like, he's a senior Blackcap. He's a veteran. Off. He's a veteran Blackcap who's played various formats for a long time. I don't think Tom Latham will be skipper and playing in the T20 series, so it's probably convenient for him, whereas someone like Ish Sodhi is definitely going to be playing the T20s, so you can kind of manage his ODI workload and then come into the T20s, or something like Santner out of the ODI squad, come back for the T20s, whereas Latham's the other way. He's definitely in the ODI team, not going to be in the T20 team most likely. But it's like, I imagine like Kieran Foran, he's been through a whole NRL season. You know, he's busted, he's bruised, he's 40 years old. He's like, why am I doing this? What's going on? Everything hurts. And then it was Michael Maguire, insert future Kiwis coach here, they give Foz a call and they're like, yo, Kieran, mate, can you come play for us? And he's like, yeah, bloody oath, mate. I just imagine that's Tom Latham. He's like, Tom Latham, do you want the series off? Nah, she'll be right, mate. I'll be there. And it's Tommy Latham. He's always there. And he might be the wicketkeeper in the squad. There's no other wicketkeeper. Oh, Tommy Blundell. So Tommy Blundell will probably be the wicketkeeper if he's playing in the first 11. That's how it is. It's Tom Latham. All format monster.
And doing different roles in each format as well, just as Kieran Foran pops up for the Kiwis and plays some dummy half, whatever's asked, whatever's required.
The White Ferns did have their T20 international series loss against Pakistan. I wrote about it, and I obviously highlighted that the White Ferns have a few iffy issues, which they've had for a long time now. They've had issues with multiple coaches. They've had the long-standing kind of selection dramas, and I was interested. First of all, it's fascinating that Bob Carter was still involved. Like, he was the assistant coach for the T20 International Series, and the bloke who replaced him, Ben Sawyer, the savior of White Ferns cricket, he obviously welcomed Bob Carter back with open arms because they both seem to have mediocre records as coaches. But Sawyer, like, credit to him, he wasn't fussed by this series loss. he was he managed to like compartmentalize it quite nicely, where he was focused on the T20 format. So he was big upping the White Ferns T20 form, going back to the Commonwealth Games, and then, their series wins maybe in Sri Lanka, South Africa. Whereas my issues with the White Ferns stem from the bigger picture, where they've been fairly mediocre in both formats, and there's the biggest issue about the White Ferns that we've consistently highlighted is that the best players don't do enough, the young players don't do enough, there's no improvement, there's weird selections, and there's a complete disregard for domestic cricket, which is a very holistic portrayal of their woes. And so when I heard Sawyer talking about how it's a blip on the radar of their T20 cricket, I was like, well, you did have an ODI series loss in Sri Lanka. You also had an ODI series loss in South Africa. Your best players aren't performing. Your younger players aren't getting better. And this stretches into like the spin guru Craig Howard as well, who might be making the spinners worse. And when you build all these little bits and pieces on top of each other and you factor in every element of the women's cricket, the White Ferns pipeline in Aotearoa, this series loss against Pakistan in Aotearoa is a new low. And I was kind of interested to hear Ben Sawyer taking no accountability for what happened and kind of just brushing it aside. I was like, well, you're no better than Bob Carter, which is why you might be working alongside Bob Carter as White Ferns coach, because you both seem to be pretty good at underwhelming results. And we'll see what happens. Obviously, the White Ferns will win the third T20. I created the White Ferns sweep. It's the White Ferns sweep, where they lose the first two games, win the third game when it doesn't matter. So that's they'll probably be victorious in the White Ferns sweep of this T20 series. And then, like, given what I've seen from Pakistan in the series, and then adding onto that a really kind of ho-hum ODI record, be interesting to see what Pakistan does in the ODI series, because the White Ferns are worse at ODI cricket than they are T20 cricket. Now, if they lose the ODI series, then I don't know. I've kind of felt like I can't scream about the stinky, icky White Ferns vibe anymore. But if they lose the ODI series to Pakistan, I might have to go walkabouts in the bush. I might have to go deep in the mangroves just to kind of figure myself out and what we're up to. But You had some question. You had a question apparently about the White Ferns, so you can antagonize me even further.
Yeah, sure. I don't mind doing that. A theory is much of a question, but I do have to run it past you because yours is the much deeper involved mind on the stuff. So, although before that, the Bob Carter kind of hired Ben Sawyer, didn't he? Because wasn't it the case that Carter, and I can't think of another situation where this would have ever happened in professional sports, where a coach who underperforms badly in the spotlight at a home World Cup like that is decided that they're not going to continue as coach, and it's not entirely clear if I don't know what I can't remember if it was him resigning or it was just sort of like a mutual agreement. I suppose a mutual agreement, but it's decided he's not going to continue as his head coach because he wasn't doing a good enough job. So they promote him instead. Like instead of firing you, just give him the effectively what was he like the technical director or whatever the head of high performance, whatever it is they call it, that type of role, which I would imagine means he probably was involved with the hiring process for the coach who replaced him, which already, if that is the case, is baffling. But then for the next coach to bring the ex-coach, the next coach to bring the ex-coach in as his assistant for a series a couple years down the line, which just happens to be one of their worst results in history because they've lost to a team they'd never lost to at home before, back to back, series defeat with a game to spare. Like I just can't think of that happening in any other context. Like if you talk about a lack of accountability, well, that's that right there. So obviously Sawyer wasn't going to have accountability if the guy before him. So, and also with that thing we're talking about with people accusing the Blackcaps, this was in the subscriber pod, people accusing the Blackcaps of jobs for the boys with their selection stuff of just picking Henry Nichols or whoever over and over and over. There's never been more of a jobs for the boys situation in history than Bob Carter getting sacked / promoted at the same time. It's unreal. Like that just should, even if everyone's on chummy situations and maybe there's progress to be made, you just shouldn't be doing that for the look of it. Like the aesthetics of that is horrendous. Well, for a losing team as well. But
well, so just
I
on
don't know,
that, like
you might want to add to that.
how were people reacting to Jitka Klimkova and the football ferns prior to the World Cup? People were questioning Klimkova, I thought, rather harshly, considering where the football ferns are in the international football landscape. You can go to Gary Stead, like people want to rip into Gary Stead and the Blackcaps management all the time. Ian Foster, All Blacks coach. They lose a few games. He's a terrible coach. He's under pressure, all this other stuff. None of that was there for Bob Carter, even though the White Ferns' performance in their home World Cup was worse than any other teams mentioned. And no one is doing that for Ben Sawyer right now. Everyone loves it. So it's just a very strange, like, I don't know, this is something we've been assessing, like I just don't understand. People are really negative about things we are positive about. And people are really positive about things we are negative about. It's a very strange mixture that does cause a lot of doubt within myself and anxiety. But your question, what point were you trying to make with the White Ferns?
Yeah, I feel the exact same thing. And you could imagine if Klimkova had been sacked from the Football Ferns job, but instead got promoted to director of football for New Zealand football and got to hire her predecessor, and then turned up at the next World Cup as an assistant, or like you could imagine the reaction if that was to happen within New Zealand football realms. Which, as you said at the start, does a fair bit of a moaning culture that does surround football in this country, which I suspect was probably imported from England, like a lot of our football culture. The thing about the White Ferns is that it's felt like this has been a long time coming. This sort of process. It's not been a quick decline. It's not been one of those things where like 3 players retire at once and you can't replace them and you've got to rebuild all of a sudden. Or an NBA team, our best player decided to be traded and we had to trade him and now we're just going to tank for a year or two and reset things. This has felt like something that was building up for quite a while because there was a long time there where the White Ferns were still pretty good. but they were pretty good because they had like 4 world-class players in their squad, and those players were so good that they could carry them. And when they won, it was because Susie Bates scored runs, Sophie Devine scored runs and took wickets. Amy Satterthwaite scored runs and then scored more runs and then scored more runs on top of that. And then you started to get Amelia Kerr joining this group as well. That was like the formula for them. And it was quite obvious then that role players weren't stepping up and winning games if those players misfired. And what you've had since then is you've started to get like, Bates was out injured for quite a while. Kerr and Devine have both had extended periods on the sideline for mental health reasons. And then Satterthwaite, I don't know if she'd still be playing if she hadn't lost her contract, but she did lose her contract and then she did retire straight away. She didn't have to retire, but she did. And now she's a WBBL winning assistant coach. Would it be fair to say, because we know Amelia Kerr, the trend with her is her batting has emerged to the point where she's now just one of the best batters in the world, but she's kind of stopped taking wickets at the same time. I haven't followed closely enough, which is why I want to ask you about the form of Susie Bates and Sophie Devine, but they haven't done anything in this series. Would it be fair to say that their decline is also kind of exposed there? Because that's what it kind of feels like, is the team that's relied on their best players to carry them are no longer getting carried by their best players. And all the other issues that were there already have now been exposed because their best players are, I don't know how old Bates and Devine are, but they're mid-30s. I don't know, like they're in the last few years probably of their careers, maybe not as good as they were 4 or 5 years ago. That's for you to confirm or deny, but it seems like that's not the base issue, but it seems like that was before the plaster that was covering the broken leg, and now even that's been ripped off because the very best players are sort of at the tail end of their careers, Kerr aside, or in one case have retired altogether, and they cannot carry them anymore the way they used to. Is that fair?
Yeah. I don't exactly know what your question is.
Well, is it fair to say that their best players are not carrying them and covering for the lack
Yes.
of role player performance otherwise, which was always the case?
This is Sophie Devine's worst year of T20 cricket with bat and ball.
There we go.
Susie Bates can barely maintain a strike rate over 100 right now. She averaged like maybe 14 in the Women's Big Bash League. Like this Susie Bates, right. And throughout WBBL, like Susie Bates, Sophie Devine, Amelia Kerr, they are celebrated as some of the best players in Women's Big Bash League. And Susie Bates and Devine, they've done it for almost 10 years. So if you do that in Australia, the Aussies love you. But suddenly Susie Bates she can't score runs, and she can't score runs quickly. Sophie Devine was pretty good for Perth, but this is her worst year of T20 cricket for the White Ferns. And Amelia Kerr, she's a good T20 bowler this year. Her ODI bowling is far worse, but she's a good T20 bowler this year. But she also just came off her worst Women's Big Bash League bowling season. So, I mean, yes. But you get to this point where you're losing to Pakistan in New Zealand when your best players aren't performing and the role players are not performing. So somehow the best players have got worse, and the role players, who most of whom are younger players, they're not getting better. So it's quite an interesting situation where if Georgia Plummer was really coming into her own and tapping into her potential, a lack of runs from Bates and Devine wouldn't matter because Maddie Green's pretty good. She's pretty solid. And you can win games if Georgia Plummer's scoring a few runs, but Bernadine Bezodenhout, she's really aggressive up the top. If she's getting 30 off 20 and so on, you might be able to score over 150 runs. The White Ferns barely scored 130 runs batting first and batting second. So that's an issue. They didn't take any wickets. That's an issue. But you can rally for a competitive game and a competitive series in New Zealand. Like, this is the thing, it's Pakistan in New Zealand. They're not in Pakistan. They lost ODI series to Sri Lanka and South Africa overseas. This is against Pakistan in New Zealand in really favourable conditions. If Hannah Rowe was pretty good in this series with the bat, but if she only took 1 wicket. Eden Carson only took 1 wicket. Like the Leah Tahuhu, best player, right? So she's in that Bates and Devine crop because she is generally one of the best seam bowlers in the world. In 2 games, she bowled 4 overs at 10 RPO. Like, these are horrible performances from the best players that make you wonder if everything's all good. I'm not suggesting that things might not be all good, but it's the type of performance that makes you think, is everything all good? You've got that stuff happening, and like, I keep bringing up the spin guru, Craig Howard, who has been celebrated, he's quote unquote the spin guru. This is, I think it's quite important because these spinners are good. Amelia Kerr, Eden Carson, Fran Jonas. You've got 3 really good spinners who should be forming a holy trinity of White Ferns spin. You got 1 leggy, you got 1 offbeat, and you got a lefty. These players, like, I reckon they're among the best bowlers available for the White Ferns, regardless of spin or seam. But they don't get better. Like, this was a bad series for Carson, or a bad 2-game stretch for Carson. Fran Jonas is easily the worst fielder in the team, and I don't think she took a wicket. No, she might have taken a couple because her and Molly Penfold did take a couple wickets, but she has, like, this year is far worse than last year, and Amelia Kerr's bowling is diminishing it while her batting increases. So the spin guru isn't making these, like, these 3 spinners are an asset. They are a strength of the White Ferns team. But they are not performing as such. Because I don't know if the White Ferns have another world-class seamer. Like, Tahuhu's a world-class seamer. I don't think Jess Kerr, Hannah Rowe, Molly Penfold are world-class seamers. So if you don't have a world-class seamer right there and Tahu's not bowling like one, then you need to look at your spinners, and you've got 3 really good spinners who could be world-class spinners or should be world-class spinners, but they're not. So that's where the issue is for the White Ferns, is the best players aren't performing, the emerging players aren't performing, and it's with the bat and it's with the ball, and they were horrible in the field. So again, if you've got a New Zealand cricket team that is horrible in the field, they're slow, they're sluggish, they're missing the ball, Bezuidenhout's fumbling behind the stumps, and I talked about it on Monday. Like, Eden Carson was bowling a good over, single, dot. Last ball, cover drive. Sophie Devine, like, literally jumps over the ball. It goes for 4, pressure released. New Zealand cricket teams are good fielding teams. And if you're a New Zealand cricket team and you're not a good fielding team, something is wrong. But we keep,
There's
just
your red flags.
So it's hopefully they win the sweep. Hopefully they are on the right end of the sweep. 2-1 series loss, and then we'll move over. I was giving them the benefit of the doubt mid-year, because I wrote about the White Ferns plateau. So they had slid into a plateau, but they were maintaining that plateau. They weren't one of the best teams. Like, they were maybe the 5th or 6th best cricket team in the world. And that's an all right plateau for the White Ferns. They were one of the best 4 teams in the world, so they diminished, they slid down to the plateau of being 5th or 6th in the world. That was a few months ago. And now they've lost the T20 series against Pakistan in New Zealand, and it's, I don't know, at least I feel kind of vindicated for how I'm reading the situation. But we'll see how the ODI series goes, because it is their worst format. But if they get an ODI series win against Pakistan, I think they are maintaining a slightly worse plateau, but they're still on the plateau. But if they lose the ODI series versus Pakistan, woo!
Yeah.
And I
That
like,
fielding is the most concerning bit, I think, hey, is the when you like you said, when you see a Kiwi fielding team that is just mistake after mistake, that is something's wrong. Like players are in their heads at that point. And you mentioned, like I was going to say, you mentioned Jonas is the worst fielder in the team. I don't know. So what I saw from Sophie Devine in those first two games was not good. Like there's midfields, there's dropped catches. She just looked like she wasn't all there. I know like no idea what's going on there, but there's not a lot of confidence through that team right now, and that's going to express itself in those little sort of the 1%ery type things. It always does in sports, and fielding is probably the first place you're going to start seeing that because you can be in good batting form and feeling confident and just get a good ball and you're out for a duck. Like that kind of thing can happen, but when it's affecting like the fielding aspects as well, you're in a dark place. I just don't. The vibes are not good, you know.
so the vibes,
But of course, nobody's noticing outside of us.
like the vibes for the White Ferns have always been palpable, tangible. Like when they lost the first game of the World Cup against West Indies, I said that they were shook. Like they genuinely look shook and afraid of the moment. The vibes are so bad that they overcame the positivity, the celebration of Susie Bates. Like that's her home ground. That's Susie Bates Oval. Everyone is there to celebrate Susie Bates in Dunedin. And they still stunk up the joint. Like that is crazy. And the other thing I was thinking about for the White Ferns is that it's very different to the Blackcaps, where the Blackcaps have immense depth. They got players, they've got competition for places. They've got young players on the rise. The best players in domestic cricket are older, experienced players who are the gatekeepers. Like you can, to even get into the Blackcaps mixer, as we've seen, Josh Clarkson, Will O'Rourke, Addy Ashok, to be those players, you have to play good cricket in domestic cricket. You have to show some X factor. You have to show some mana and skill and grit and actually perform. None of that is there for the White Ferns. So the issue for the White Ferns is there aren't better players putting pressure on the current White Ferns. Yeah, I can say they ignore domestic cricket, which is an issue for starters, but also there is no... I have no faith in the White Ferns system that they can select a player from domestic cricket who has not performed in domestic cricket, who has no confidence from domestic cricket, and develop them for the White Ferns. Like, they don't do that either. So there aren't many players putting pressure on the White Ferns from domestic cricket, but also if the White Ferns do select a player from domestic cricket, I have no confidence and faith in the White Ferns system to make that player better. So how do the White Ferns get better? I don't know. That's
a good question.
That's a bit of an issue for White Ferns, but we'll see how they go in the ODI series against Pakistan. Far more positive, far more exciting, far more invigorating, far more interesting, and a far better, like, the White Ferns' misery and chaos stands out because like the Blackcaps pipeline's pretty good. We've talked about the depth, but also just the systems involved. The Wellington Phoenix system is really good, men and women. Warriors system is firing. That's a good system. The White Ferns system and pipeline stands out in a landscape and a vista of really good systems, of really good pipelines. And a good example of that is the Wellington Phoenix. The men, they are playing on Saturday at the Cake Tin against the Newcastle Jets. The women are playing on Sunday afternoon in Porirua against the Melbourne Victory. Let me do my mandatory ladder check for these two Phoenix opponents. The Newcastle, well, the women, they are playing the Victory. Victory are spot below them on the ladder. Victory are fourth, Wellington Phoenix women are third. On the men's ladder, Newcastle Jets are ninth, and of course the big Donnies of the A-League, the Wellington Phoenix men, they are first. So I'll be basic check. Tough game for the women against the relatively evenly matched Melbourne Victory. Should be an easier game for the Wellington Phoenix against a Newcastle Jets team who have one win. Wellington Phoenix men have 4 wins. How are you feeling about these 2 games for the Wellington Phoenix?
Well, the women's game's going to be fascinating because they've been going great, but they've copped a few blows since the last time they played. They've just had the international window, and since then, Chloe Knott's withdrawn from her contract and took a party shot or two, and as she departed,
Was
I
that, hold on, was that like with the Wellington Phoenix management, were they doing something wrong, or was it like a contracting, like she wasn't happy with the contracting situation of the A-League?
not entirely clear. Like there were definitely stuff that referred to the Phoenix, but she wasn't specific about anything. She just sort of talking about wanting to be in an environment that's like supportive of everyone and this kind of stuff. And um, one of the things I wrote about in the email about this is like she is one of the older players in the squad. She's only like 27, but that does still make her, I think, the second oldest player in the squad behind Longo. And she's had time to like actually build a career outside of football. And she has her and her partner have a house in Auckland, apparently, according to the Stuff report, at least. We're the only ones who said this, but I'll trust them. And she was having to rent in Wellington. So she's paying a mortgage and a rent at the same time. And like she's just in a different situation of her life than most of the other players in that squad who are not on the housing market, I would imagine, and are not have. Some of them might even still be able to live at home, and not have to pay that all together, rather than paying double, paying mortgage and rent. So she's just in a different spot, and I think a lot of the stuff she referred to, even the stuff that did refer to the Phoenix, while it wasn't specific enough for us to be able to say, I think this is a little bit more women's football in general rather than Phoenix. So yeah, the A-League overall doesn't pay its players enough, and women's professionalism is happening very quickly without like foundations behind it. And one of the things that leads to is that players are getting to an age where they're suddenly expected to play like 40, 50 games, probably not 50, but like 40 odd games a year if you're an international and playing professionally, and whatever. Maybe if you have an off-season gig as well somewhere, short-term loan to make some more money and to stay busy. When that's the case and you never really had that baseline to academy stuff growing up, injuries can happen. And that's one of the reasons why people have suspected that there's like a lot of these ACL injuries happening in women's football. It's one of the reason no one's pinpointed at a specific reason is because there isn't one specific reason. There's a bunch of them, but one of them is that players are having to up their workload now with how quickly things have become professional. And Marissa Vandermeer, unfortunately, is now amongst that, and Grace Wisniewski has already had that. 2 season-ending knee injuries for the Phoenix for 2 probably starting level players. Vandermeer had played every minute, but then she goes over and gets injured in the warm-ups for what might have been her international debut. So devastating stuff there, and they're gonna have to plug some gaps. They have just signed, and let me see if I can find this. Like as we were recording, they signed a new like their last import spot, which had been left open. They'd signed an American midfielder called, if this ever loads for me, her name is Isabel Cox. So she's coming from University of North Carolina, which I think is the same place Katie Bowen actually went, come to think of it, and has done 5 years of college. So I guess she's about 22, 23, made 2 national title things. And one of the trends that I've seen a lot is how much the college pathways have been limited, like since the A-League pathways have come along, and how just getting on board with the professional game a little bit earlier seems to be beneficial when a lot of these players finish college in the States who were already there and then just go and get A-League contracts anyway. Like Hannah Blake's a good example of doing that, and I suspect we might see 1 or 2 more in January. I'm interested how this looks for a highly pedigreed American college player though who comes to the A-League to see what that standard looks like. So curious about that, but also they needed some cover, and they've signed an important midfielder to help them out there, which probably frees up Rebecca Lake to go be the starting centre back. They're still going to need to sign more, and they won't be at least one more injury replacement player, and it's not going to be able to be another import because they've now finished up those spots, so they'll need to find a local from somewhere. See how it goes, but that's the trick for the Phoenix women at the moment, is they've had a lot of momentum, but here they've suddenly lost a few players, and you've got a small squad to begin with, and like how much of those sort of setbacks can you withstand? This is a good signing to help them with that, and I suspect we'll get at least one more in the coming weeks as well. So just a matter of can they continue the momentum with the old, I guess, next woman up strategy. As to the blokes, there's no dramas. There's nothing to worry about there. Haven't lost a game all season. Their defense is immaculate. Alex Paulson just got named Player of the Week and Player of the Month, I think it was. In fact, the Phoenix did a clean sweep. The Paul Templer and Giancarlo Italiano both got Manager of the Month, and Riley Foster and Alex Paulson, so the two respective goalkeepers, got Player of the Month for the A-League. I think that is done by fan vote, though, so maybe the Wellington fans just spammed it. But, I mean, all four are clearly deserving of those honours for what they've been able to get up to. And the blokes with the game, who'd you say they're playing? Newcastle, eh? That is... They do have Dane Ingham, so there's one Kiwi international on the books there, but that's a game I would expect them to win. It's a game where the Knicks are just playing the way they've been playing. They probably should win. I don't think they'll win by much because they don't still have an abundance of goals in them, but defensively they're as good as they are, and that's going to continue to carry them. Maybe we'll get another couple clean sheets. I don't know. Melbourne Victory are tough. Melbourne Victory a tough opponent for the women, though. That is that's not easy footy there, especially when you're having to make a couple of adjustments to your starting 11 as a result.
We will finish here with a bit of Ford Trophy cricket. So we have Auckland versus Northern in Whangarei. We've currently got Finn Allen going Berko. He's on 47 of 44 deliveries. Auckland have got Ashok in their team as usual. And also Ben Lister. Haven't seen much of Ben Lister, but he's a lefty. He's in that Blackcaps.
Wait, wasn't he injured?
Yeah,
he's listed as injured by the Blackcaps.
He is in the unavailable list for the Blackcaps, but he's making his return in the Ford Trophy here. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs. Northern Districts. Matt Fisher's still there, which is good. Like this trio of young Northern bowlers is quite interesting. Matt Fisher, Tim Pringle, and Christian Clark. But they are currently getting spanked by Finn Allen. We also have Central Districts hosting Otago in New Plymouth. Central Districts got the bro Will Clark. Fantastic young all-rounder. Josh Clarkson obviously promoted to the Blackcaps. He's playing in this game. And Otago, their team's pretty solid, pretty stock standard with the Lou Johnson's there. And that's all that matters for Kiwi cricket fans is the funky hitting of Lou Johnson. Then you've got Canterbury versus Wellington, which is in Wellington. And Canterbury have Will O'Rourke's playing. Will O'Rourke's just always playing cricket. Like he's never really injured, which for you'd hope, touch wood, whatever. But for a tall bloke like him, he plays a lot of cricket, which is a good sign. Reece Madiu is in the Canterbury lineup. He's due to bat number 3. I have noticed that Cameron Paul, he has dropped out of the first 11. So whether he's injured, he's only 18 years old. So it's a bit freaky that he was in the Canterbury first 11 to start with, but he has dropped out. So you've got Folkes, McKenzie, Ray, and O'Rourke as the seamers for Canterbury there. Wellington, Muhammad Abbas is making his one-day debut. So he hasn't played Ford Trophy yet, and he is in the middle order for Wellington. They've still got their Ben Sears, Adam Milne combo there. And this Wellington's bowling attack, you got Nathan Smith, Logan Van Beek, Adam Milne, and Ben Sears, as well as the leggy of Peter Younghusband. So you've got a pretty nice seam attack / bowling attack for Wellington. And that's a roundup of the teams. Wellington currently only got 1 wicket down. There was a wicket for Mackenzie, and Luke Georgeson, all-rounder for Otago. He's taken a wicket for Otago, with Central Districts having a bat there. That's the Ford Trophy landscape. You want to quiz me on any Ford Trophy matters? Hard and fast.
Well, I whipped up I do have the, what do you call it, the Auckland game on in the background, so I can see Finn Allen just brought up his 50. I don't know if 50 or 47 counts as Burko, though. I think for Finn Allen's standards, that's quite a subdued effort. Not as subdued as George Worker at the other end, scoring it under 50.
He's got 6 4s and a 6, so what's 6 times 4? 24, 1 6, 30.
Yeah.
He's whacking boundaries, which is what he does.
He's still hitting boundaries, yeah. He also, I think, I didn't see it happen, but it looked like he got hit in the nuts by Christian Clark earlier. So I think that might have eased him up a little bit. There was at one point where he was getting a bit of treatment at the end of the over. If that's what it takes to slow down Finn Allen, then fair enough. You got to do what you got to do if you can beat the bat one way or another. But he's churning along. So what's the because this is always a fun thing to check whenever any team list comes out. What's the Canterbury bowling lineup looking?
They have Zach Folks, Angus McKenzie, Michael Ray, Will O'Rourke, with Michael Rippon and Cole McConchie. Cole McConchie, spinner. Rippon's a spinner. They also have BJ Jacobs. I think it's Bevan Jacobs. I don't think he's bowled too much. I think he's more of a batter, but he is another young Canterbury cricketer who has come into their Ford Trophy team. I think it's Bevan Jacobs.
They just seem to have a never-ending production line there. As another talented young cricketer coming through for Canterbury. What do you know?
And Jacob Duffy's playing, so be interesting to see how Jacob Duffy goes in that ODI squad, because you do feel like he needs a couple of big performances just to solidify himself in that Blackcaps depth chart, because there's Will O'Rourke and Henry Shipley are coming, at least, let alone Ben Lister, Ben Sears, those type of characters as well.
So that's like what, 3 or 4 or 5 dudes from that Blackcaps ODI squad who are getting games today, and I think there's more games on the weekend. Is that right as well?
Could be.
Maybe.
It's more.
Remains to be seen. One game at a time.
Yeah, don't look too far into the future, because we'll be doing Ford Trophy debrief tomorrow. We'll have the newsletter coming out tomorrow. You got a arrival date on some Wellington Phoenix deep dive?
It might have to be next week now, because they'll play and then it'll be out of date. But it's Tuesday, the next round of Ford Trophy games, just to be clear on that. Not the weekend, but not far after.
Beauty. Cheers for the update. That is the newscast. We will be back maybe on Monday, probably on Monday, with another podcast. Otherwise, stay tuned. Got lots of Aotearoa sporting content on our website via Substack. Got that subscriber podcast for you, waiting for your eardrums to listen to as well. And big up to everyone who supports the Niche Case directly through Patreon and Substack, or anyone who has donated via Buy Me a Coffee. Big up yourself, love yourself, kia kaha, stay beautiful, church.